Okay, well, I will go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we'll start with the minutes of the last meeting, Jim.
Hi, everyone. President Jack Baker called the Going State District Hearing meeting to order at 10:05 a.m. with 14 members and guests present virtually. 50 people have viewed the YouTube video. The minutes of the July 17th meeting were read by Secretary Jim Terry and approved as read. Ruth Faulkner's financial report was read by Vice President David Hampton. Total monies as of August 21st, 2021 is $15,862.49. The report was approved as given. Maribel Chase gave her Cherokee Moment presentation, reading from transcribed records of Cherokee wills from 1848 to 1879 in the Going State District. These records can be found on microfilm at the Oklahoma Historical Society. Curtis Rohr announced the Oklahoma chapter of the Trail of Tears Association has been given a collection of Cherokee books. Sale proceeds of these books will go for scholarships for Cherokee students. Contact Curtis if you are interested in purchasing these books. Jack Baker announced this year's National Trail of Tears Association Conference in North Carolina has been postponed to September 19th through 21st, 2022 because of COVID-19. David Hampton was our featured speaker. His presentation was about the life of Dr. Emmett Starr and his ancestor. David announced his new Nancy Ward book was being printed now in 2 volumes. Contact them at CherokeeResearch@gmail.com to order the books. Jack Baker adjourned the meeting at 11:19 a.m.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, I would entertain a motion that they be approved as given. Okay, Becky is making the motion. And is there a second? And Rita has seconded. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye or a thumbs up.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. And David, do you have the treasurer's report?
I do. My video keeps going on and off, so I'll watch it and see if I can turn it back on here. Beginning checking balance 7,186. From dues, $19. Paid out to Siloam Springs Printing, $690. $690. I don't know what's wrong with my audio. It keeps going out here. So the total checking now is $6,514. CD beginning balance $8,676. Interest earned $2. Ending balance $8,679. And the total money is $15,193.
Okay. Thanks, Dave. Okay. Anything to add, Curtis?
Jack, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
I wanted to give you an update on Maribel. I was finally able to reach her, and on August the 31st, she had her doctor's appointment and went to the doctor, and he done all kinds of tests and then sent her downstairs for another test, and she fainted on the elevator.
Oh dear.
And the door closed, but a lady happened to punch the button and discovered her, and they came and got her right quick and took her to St. John's. They discovered that after all the tests they run, that she had a heartbeat that was about to jump out of her chest. And so they installed a pacemaker. and after a few days sent her home, and she was home about a day and a half, and things went south, so to speak. And the doctor said, Maribel, you need to go back to the hospital. So they sent her back to the hospital. And she is there now, but very, very, she says she just doesn't have any strength. So they are going to put her in a rehab for a while till she gets stronger. Hopefully, she said it would be fairly close to her home, to where her sons won't have to travel clear across town to get to her. But she's doing okay, she said, and that to express her regrets that she wasn't able to be in the Going Snake meeting. I told her we'd remember her in our prayers, and she really appreciated that. So that's pretty much the story as of today.
Okay. Well, appreciate the update, Curtis. Now, Curtis had not been able to reach her, either her cell or home number, for several days. So he started calling hospitals in order to locate her. And fortunately, he did. And we appreciate your concern in doing that, Curtis. So, well, thanks, Curtis. Do we have any other business to cover? Well, the First Americans Museum opens today, and I'm actually going with Joseph Erb and his wife, Melissa Lewis, because Joseph will be speaking at 2 o'clock because he has an entire huge wall of copper engraving that he did or designed, and then the manufacturers did it. And I was there with them whenever they were installing it. It was about half installed and it looked fantastic. But it's a huge deal, and after 3 decades, it's finally opening today. So I'm going today with them to hear Joseph, and then I'm going back on Monday with some other friends to take a more detailed tour. One person we'll be meeting then on Monday is, if you know, Jim Pate and his wife Betty are coming in. And so we're meeting them there at the museum for lunch on Monday. Mary Ellen Meredith and 2 of her sisters. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of the museum. I was taking a tour a few weeks ago when I was at Joseph, and it's absolutely spectacular. And the newscast here, they've had tours, and they say it's marvelous. So y'all need to come to Oklahoma City to see the new First Americans Museum. So somehow, Becky, fit that in to your schedule. Here.
Yes, I plan on it. And in fact, Bill John Baker was there a few evenings ago and sent me some pictures, and Nancy Ward is in it, the painting by Sharon Erla, and and a little bit more about Nanyehi. So I can't wait to go see it.
Good.
For people like me that can't go to Oklahoma today, it is live streaming the events today from 10:30 to 8:30 p.m. y'all's time.
Yeah, the grand entry starts at 10:30, where the 39 tribes in Oklahoma will be marching in. So it's spectacular, and it's quite an accomplishment. He said it's taken 3 decades to get it completed, because I remember being interviewed in the mid-90s about what I would like to see in the museum. So that was in the initial planning stages. So come to Oklahoma City. And let me know, and I'll meet you, or you can come by, whatever. So
Oh boy, lunch is on you.
I could do that, yes. So, okay. Okay. Well, do we have any further business? If not, I would like to introduce our speaker. And actually, Danielle, I apologize. I've known you for some time, but I don't really know that much about you. But she is her doctorate this summer from Middle Tennessee State University. And of course, she's has worked or volunteered at Red Clay and worked with Erin there. And Erin Medley, I'd like to introduce her. She's the director of Red Clay State Park, and we appreciate all that she's doing to maintain our fabulous historic site.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you.
So, but Danielle did her dissertation on Red Clay, and we're very happy to have her tell us a little bit more about Red Clay today. So not a very good introduction, but I will turn it over to you, Danielle. And we do appreciate your being here.
Well, thank you very much, Jack. And I really appreciate being invited to speak with the Going Snake District Heritage Association. It's a real honor to speak to y'all today. Well, like you said, my name is Danielle Shelton. I just graduated last month from Middle Tennessee State with my PhD in public history, specializing in historic preservation. I've spent the last 3.5 years studying Red Clay. I'm still a student of Red Clay, and probably will be the rest of my life. I'm currently a historian for the U.S. Forest Service, but that was it's a temporary position. They're trying to get me on there full time, but I might be freed up here in the next couple months. But in the meantime, I do historic preservation work for the Forest Service all over the country. I'm leaving tomorrow morning for Montana for a week to do work up there. So, but I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I would first like to acknowledge that where I live and work was once the land of the Anakaduagi, known now as the Cherokee people. And of course, Red Clay was the last capital of the Cherokee Nation prior to removal, sometimes called the capital in exile. So, but before the Cherokee came there, it belonged to other folks. Along the ridge, Red Clay is situated in the valley and ridge kind of topography. So it's a really narrow valley, maybe, I don't know, 3/4 of a mile wide, with ridges that rise up on either side of it. And on the ridge on the west side of the park, it's covered in these strange little rock piles. And we had an archaeologist go out with us one day to look at them. And, you know, without doing a proper survey, all that she could say was that they were man-made. They were of the size and shape that she had seen in southeastern burials. So there may be cairns on that ridge. And talking to some folks whose families have been in that area for over 100 years, and I was asking him, because he grew up there, I was like, hey, have you seen these rock piles, all, you know, on these ridges in other places? It's like, oh yeah, it's covered in them. So that could potentially have been, you know, a burial grounds. We don't know for sure. But on the other side of the park, on a private property as well, we have this potential mound. And it doesn't look so big here, but we measured it out. It's about 200 feet by 250 feet and about 5 or 6 feet high. It's massive. And I've been trying for, over 2 years now to actually get somebody out to do GPR and, you know, not only of the park, but of these other areas as well, to see if, you know, if it's an actual mound. We kind of need to know that. The landowner wants to protect it, but, you know, he's getting up in years, and, you know, who knows what'll happen after he's gone. But this place, it was part of the paramount chiefdom of Coosa, which stretched all along the southern Appalachians, all the way down into like Georgia. So this very likely could have been a mound, you know, a site that was used for hundreds, if not thousands of years, long before the Cherokee came to the region in the early to mid 1700s. Now, at the park itself, we have 7 reconstructed Cherokee buildings. We are about to start construction on an 8th. We got a grant to do a Cherokee blacksmith shop, and there was one there historically in 1836 at the time of the property valuations. So we're very excited to get started on that. However, when that valuation was taken in 1836, there were 91 log buildings at the council ground and along Council Ground Creek, which is now called Mills Creek. But I mean, the park has 263 acres, but I've theorized that it was much bigger. So here's the park today. I believe that it stretched all the way up a couple miles till the gap in the ridges right here. And according to Brother Clowder in the Journal of the Moravians Among the Cherokees, they had to move the council ground in 1837. It was used from 1832 to 1837. There were 11 councils held there. And of course, this is where the Cherokee were fighting removal, you know, diplomatically and through the legal system. But in 1837, they had to move a bit up the way because squatters had come in and taken over where they were having their meetings. So in that place, according to George Feathershaw, who's got, you know, the most vivid descriptions of the council ground, he was only there in 1837. And what he described was only 2 miles from John Ross's house, which was right up here in present-day Flint Springs. So, I mean, this is where I think it was. Again, until we get somebody out with some GPR to try to find things for us, we can't be totally for sure. But the reason that I believe that the Red Clay State Park is still part of the original council grounds is simply because of the spring that's there, the council spring. They call it the Blue Hole Spring. But Cherokee have been coming there ever since removal. They never stopped coming to that spring. It has always been a sacred place. And I'll show you pictures of that a little later on. Now, the Cherokee weren't the only folks, of course, who were being removed from the Southeast at that time. They had already been cut off from pretty much all of the other Native people geographically, except for the Creek. They were still in close proximity with the Creek. And in 1836, when the Creek removal began in earnest with the beginning of the Second Creek War, between 2,000 to 3,000 Creek asylum seekers flooded into the Cherokee Nation. And the Army came in and started violently removing them. And the Creek petitioned the Cherokee Council at Red Clay asking for asylum, and the council gave it to them, but they said that they could not protect them from the Army. However, they would not participate in that removal of the Creek. And so after, there were approximately 200 Creeks at Red Clay. 122 were violently removed. At least one man died in that. And this is the petition that the Creek headmen sent to the council. and you know, anyway, after they violently removed most of the Creek from the Cherokee Nation, the Army finally was like, okay, all right, we'll just let the rest of them be removed with the Cherokee. The Cherokee don't have that much longer anyway to be in the southeast. So the next year, the remaining approximately 400 to 500 Creeks were removed with the Cherokee. Oops. So I believe in calling things what they are, and the removal forts that were built all throughout the Cherokee Nation were actually concentration camps, which are a place where large numbers of people, such as prisoners of war, political prisoners, refugees, or the members of an ethnic or religious minority, are detained or confined under armed guard. So we have this lovely little map drawn in 1838 that shows a lot of these forts, and there was a fort here at Red Clay. And for the longest time, I really thought that perhaps there wasn't an actual structure there, that maybe it was just an armed encampment. But with those Moravian journals being published in English finally back in January of this year, they actually talk about there being a fort at Red Clay, and there were at that particular time 50 Cherokee people that were sick inside the fort. And we know Dr. Eliezer Butler treated some of those patients. Others, of course, were not going to seek Euro-American medicine. They had their own medicine people that they trusted. But we know that people died there. We have no idea where they were buried. But there was an actual fort there. And we don't know where that was either. Again, we would love to have a GPR come out. If I could do it, we would have done it already, but I don't have those skills. So there were spoliation claims filed in the Going Snake District in the 1840s that were filed by people who came from Red Clay or right around that area. So we had David Downing, Charles Manning, his brother Thomas Manning, his widow filed a claim. And she was the daughter of Sleeping Rabbit, who, I don't know if y'all know who he was, but he has always been associated with the council ground. One of the very first acts of memorialization that happened at Red Clay was his supposed grave. There's debate over whether that was his grave or not, but there is actually a marker on his grave, or his supposed grave, just on the Georgia side of the line. And he did have improvements on the council ground, along Council Ground Creek, and in just south of the Tennessee-Georgia state line, because that's where Red Clay sits, right on the border of Tennessee and Georgia. I thought it was really interesting too. There was actually a claim by a Creek woman, Aniyaha, pardon me for messing up her name, but yeah, she filed a decently substantial claim there. So after removal, like nearly 100 years later, you start getting memorialization of the Cherokee in the Southeast. It happened in 3 phases, and it first began really over with the Eastern Band of the Cherokee. They started doing like this fall festival, and it kind of coincided with the opening of the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. So there had been like promoters that came in, and they were really trying to promote the park, of course, but they had this exotic, quote unquote, I'm putting scare quotes, this exotic thing there. They had this native tribe that was untouched, and that's kind of how they promoted it. And so they began with that, and that kind of grew, and then Chattanooga wanted it on that, or parts of Tennessee. So like then you get memorialization that happens, like a big festival in Knoxville. And then in 1830, you get the Daughters of the American Revolution, the DAR. They memorialized or commemorated Ross's landing in Chattanooga. And as part of that, they invited out John Ross's grandson, Robert Bruce Ross. And after that little ceremony, they brought him out to Red Clay. And this is him and this group of folks who there on the banks of the Council Spring, one of the gentlemen suggested that they become like this Cherokee Heritage Society, and they did. And Robert Bruce Ross was voted vice president then and there. Of course, as soon as he got back from his homeland, he went home and died 2 months later. So, and that little historical society, they stayed pretty active for a few years. We have some of their papers actually at University of Tennessee at Chattanooga's library that you can see online if you ever are that interested. But the second phase of Cherokee memorialization that really had an impact at Red Clay, and that happened starting in the 50s, going all the way up into the 70s. And in 1964, the heart of where the park is, especially the spring itself, that was going to be sold, and a beer brewing company wanted it for the spring water. And the spring is amazing. It's like at the deepest, it's about 14 feet deep, I believe. It puts out like 300 gallons of water a minute. I mean, it's massive. Looking at it, you would never know that because it seems very tranquil and calm, but it puts out a lot of water. And they wanted it to brew beer, and Colonel James Korn ended up purchasing the property from the farmer that was selling it because he wanted to save the council grounds and build a park there. And so then a couple months later, the Cherokee Red Clay Association had their very first meeting, and they were the advocacy group that worked for 15 years to get that park together. In the 70s, they starting with Colonel Korn's purchase of that property, the state started buying up other pieces of land around that, and to finally to constitute that 263 acres that we have there now. Once it's really this weird, historically ironic thing that I think that one of the reasons given for why the United States needed to remove the Cherokee and other Native peoples was because they owned land collectively, and that was just something that white people could not wrap their mind around and understand, because then they couldn't just buy it. That's really what it was about. They just wanted the land, right? So they removed the Cherokee, the Creek, and all the other Native peoples pretty much from the whole eastern United States. But once the state of Tennessee owned this land collectively again, then the Cherokee were able to come back. And that's how the Cherokee have made this their site again. It never wasn't their site, honestly, but this is still culturally their site, absolutely. They come back to the Council Spring to pray, and for lots of other reasons that I'll go through, but this is the main mark, or like a natural feature. There's nothing else that was left from that time. This is the only real feature left from that time period and long before. But the Cherokee are the only people allowed into the pool of the spring itself. Now there's runoff that comes out of that folks can get in, other folks can get in if they would like, but the pool itself is restricted access to Cherokee people, and they come there to go to water. A lot of times we have folks that often drive from Cherokee, North Carolina, nearly 150 miles just to go to water here because it's sacred. The Cherokee Cultural Celebration has been happening for 40 years next year. Granted, last year and this year we weren't able to have it Hopefully next year things will be better and we can have it again. But that's been going on since 1982, and it's a 2-day celebration where Cherokee, like the 3 federally recognized bands, have representation there and help support it. And they show off their cultural awesomeness to everybody. We've had 3 modern councils at Red Clay, starting with the very first one in 1984. We had it at the 25th anniversary in 2009, so they brought the council back to Red Clay. And in 2013 or 15, Erin?
2015.
Yeah. They had the tri-council there in our reconstructed council house, which I think is really super awesome. One of the ways that the Cherokee, there's only like 2 ways that the Cherokee have memorialized Red Clay with things. They memorialize it with their presence all the time, but like the only 2 like tactile things that are there from the Cherokee are the eternal flame and like this little memorial tree that was planted a few years back for an Eastern Band gentleman who passed away, who was a big supporter of the park. But the eternal flame was lit by runners who came from Cherokee, North Carolina. They ran that 150 miles back in 1984 for the opening ceremonies of the Joint Council. And that was the same fire that was there in 1837 when the council met there. The firekeeper, brought embers of that, kept them alive. When they had to walk the Trail of Tears, it was split up, I think, into like 4 different fire pots and taken on different attachments so that at least part of it would get there. And once it reached Cherokee Nation in the West, it was split up again. And in 1951, 4 elders from the Eastern Band drove in a truck all the way over across the Trail of Tears to visit, their cousins over in the West, and convinced one of the keepers of the fire to let them light some charcoal, which they put in a bucket and fed. Somebody's had to sit in the back of the truck all the way to Cherokee, North Carolina from Tahlequah, feeding that fire the whole time. And then they had their own eternal flame over in Cherokee. And that's where they lit torches. 7 runners brought it to Red Clay in 1984. So that's my favorite story about Red Clay, because like the Cherokee, the fire came home. So we also have groups of young folks who come to Red Clay to learn about their history and their heritage. And they always visit the Blue Hole. They get a little tour, have the Remember the Removal Riders, as well as the Cherokee Tribal Youth Council. And I've heard that a group from UKB may have came this year, but I don't have pictures of them. If they did, Erin, we need to try to find pictures so we can put that on our digital exhibit as well. So the 3rd phase of Cherokee memorialization was with the Trail of Tears National Historic Trail, which kind of got started in the late 80s. And Red Clay was the 5th site added as a certified site to the trail, or the National Historic Trail. And that happened, I believe, in 96. But we only got our sign like in 2018 or something. But anyway, definitely part of the trail. So that's the highlights that I wanted to share with y'all today. I was trying to keep it short. It's hard to like squinch like 300 pages down to like 20 minutes. So I'm sorry if I went over. But do y'all have any questions?
I would like to comment about the grave of Sleeping Rabbit. He supposedly was the brother of Going Snake.
Yeah.
And of course, Wing Snake settled in eastern Oklahoma, and of course our association is named for him and the district that was named after him. Actually, we're named for the district, but it was named for him. He was buried north of Westville, and not too far from the end of the trail at Woodall's. But that's a close connection with Sleeping Rabbit and Going Snake, since they were brothers.
I'd totally forgotten about that, Jack. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yep. So, no one has any questions for Danielle?
I don't have a question, but I just want to say how much I've enjoyed learning more about red clay.
Yes.
And I've been there several times, and a lot of
You keep freezing up, Becky.
us on the bus trip in and all of us we visited there, and some of us did get into the Blue Hole Spring. And it was so it's so healing. I just can't explain it. But thank you, Danielle.
Truly, it's been my pleasure. This has been such a wonderful experience learning about all the cool things that have happened at Red Clay.
And I might add that David Hampton and I, along with our friends Mary Witcher and Lee Fleming, attended the '84 Joint Council. And our friend Mary Witcher had visited the spring while it was still totally grown up in briars and all that. Colonel Corn had taken her there back sometime in the 60s, her and her cousin. And of course, I met Colonel Corn that day, but then he sent Mary Witcher a letter that evening after the council, which is dated April 6th of 1984. And I've shared a copy of the letter with Aaron, but because I have the original that I'm not quite willing to give up yet. But in that, Colonel Corn says, of all his accomplishments, and I'm there were many, many accomplishments.
No, Tiger.
He said, the accomplishments, I think the greatest is my saving Red Clay for the Cherokee people.
He was so so important to, of course, to that site. But he, at the 1985 Joint Council in Tahlequah, I believe, the Eastern Band adopted him into the tribe and gave him the name Whippoorwill.
And I was there when that happened too.
Wow.
So this is Anna, and Danielle, do you mind putting up those last pictures you had?
Yes, ma'am, I can do that.
I think, Jack, am I right that the council meeting where we got the money for the Cherokee books, that's a photograph. So on the bottom left, am I right, Jack?
Yeah, that's the 84 council.
No, that's an 84. If she goes back.
Oh.
So the wonderful descriptions that are in the Moravian Diaries, which have only recently been published, are wonderful. And if you don't have one of those, you really want it, because Clowder really describes the things that went on at Red Clay. And I just want to tell you that the council meeting where that was approved, what year was that, Jack?
In 37.
No, when the Cherokee.
It was in 2009. I think it may be one photo back, then, or one slide back. No, still another one. And another one. There we go.
There we go. Top left, Jack, is that right?
Yes. Well, top right is as we look at it.
Okay.
For
so
the
top right, what happened, and can I tell about that? What happened that day is Jack Baker really wanted for the Moravian Diaries to be published. And so we managed to get the Moravian archivist at the time, whose name was Dan Cruz, to come to that council meeting. And he came to that council meeting. Was that a tri-council, Jack?
It was a joint council.
Joint council meeting, and told them about the Moravian records. And Jack Baker, who was on the council at the time, and likely the treasurer.
Well, and I think if you look at the upper right photo, right in the middle, I believe you'll see me behind the table there.
Right, and I think, is that Dan Cruz in that black suit? Right in front of you? I kind of see the back of his bald head. Anyway.
I think he's maybe sitting down at that point.
Okay. Anyway, he came and talked to the council and told about some of the records. So the reason that we have the Moravian records came out of that council, the Moravian records being published, came out of Jack Baker speaking to the council that day. And at that point in time, the Eastern Band and the Cherokee Nation promised money to be paid to the Moravian Archives so those records could be transcribed, translated, and published. And just, I mean, there are wonderful accounts of people playing fiddles, what it was like at night walking around. So please, if you haven't read those, it's more of a sense of what that community was going on in those council meetings. So I just had to plug that and tell you how responsible Jack is for getting those. And that was how many years ago? Help me, you're the mathematician.
That was 12 years ago.
That was 12 years ago. So a lot of what we know about red clay comes out of there. Anyway, sorry.
Well, Anna had just as much to do with it, I might add, getting them published.
And Wilma Mankiller was there that day. And her daughters, right, Jack? She was riding in a golf cart. It was a wonderful event.
Yeah.
Well, we owe you a debt, and Jack. We wouldn't know all this stuff. Right. And I would have graduated back in May, but that latest edition that had all the cool stuff about red clay wasn't published until January of this year. So I basically had to throw out a lot of things that I thought I knew about the council ground and rethink things. But I'm so sorry that Mr. Starbuck died. Before anything else could be done. But for this research, I'm just so grateful that it came out before I had turned that thing in. Because that for researchers, that's always the fear, is that, oh my gosh, this giant thing's going to happen after I've finished and published, but no, I owe that gentleman a huge debt, because I wouldn't have known that it had been moved in 1837. We wouldn't know that at all. Wouldn't know about the absolute horrors necessarily of what happened to the creek. I knew about the creek being removed, but those Moravian journals really, really detail it. It was pretty bad.
Yes. And hopefully volume 11 will be out sometime in the next few months, we hope, because the Moravian Archives has hired someone else to work on what Richard had already started on volume 11. And Richard had actually laid out, which will be, of course, in Oklahoma, starting in that. So it talks about the rebuilding of the nation, volume 11 will. And then there's Richard, before he died, had laid out 5 volumes taking it up to the Civil War, exactly what should be in each one. So hopefully we'll continue that. At least we plan to.
Do you know if there are any potential plans to translate the Moravian archives that are in Pennsylvania?
Go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, we've talked about that. Some of that is still in German script. There is a Clowder diary that is, I don't know. Yes, we would like to do that. I think that will, at this point, be easier than translating some of what's in the Southern Province, which is in Old Salem. I think that will be easier because we have an archivist there who speaks German, whose German is his first language. And I think that might be, Jack, that might be the best project to undertake at this point.
No. And they're extremely helpful there. Ann and I, well, Ann had been there before, but Ann and I visited there last year, just before the pandemic really hit, the first week in March.
Yep.
So
I think I showed you the photograph of George Hicks's daughter that I got last time I was there, which is amazing. George Hicks was one of the detachment leaders.
Yes, and she was actually in school at Salem.
Yep.
During the removal. George Hicks took her in August before they left. After they had already been rounded up, but he took her and her sister to Salem to go to school, and the Moravians actually accepted them and schooled them for nothing, which they never did.
Never did. Yeah. And she taught the Cherokee Nation until the end of her life. She came back and taught both in the Cherokee schools and mission schools until the end of her life.
And when Ann and I were there last year, we, as she said, we obtained a picture of her.
Right.
And there were several good pictures of Oaks that were taken around 1900 by one of the Moravians.
Right.
The child, he had been at the mission as a child with his parents. He returned to see it around 1900 and took or the early 1900s, and took a whole series of photographs, which are very good. And some of the people also.
And for those of you that don't know, Oaks, Oklahoma is where the Moravians founded a mission once the removal had happened.
Yeah, in New Spring Place. In the State District, by the way.
Yeah, in the Going State, of course. I think it's at the confluence of how many districts, Jack?
It's where Going Snake, Tahlequah, Saline, and Delaware all corner right there near Oaks Mission. But Oaks just happens to be in the section that's in the Going Snake District.
Oh, anyway.
Okay. Well, if we have no further business, I will declare us adjourned.